Welcome to Entrepreneurs, Executives, and Eccentrics, a podcast dedicated to the stories, strategies, and secrets of remarkable individuals. Join us as we engage in enlightening conversations with intriguing entrepreneurs, accomplished executives, and fascinating eccentrics, exploring their journeys, triumphs, and the unconventional wisdom that has shaped their success. In this episode, we talk with Jason Ryder, co-founder of Thriving Design and inventor of the patented C-Bite garden clip. He shares how he went from 3D printing prototypes at home to running his own injection molding machines and building national distribution. We dig into product design, early wins that mislead, and the grind of retail and e-commerce. You'll hear what it takes to launch, manufacture, and grow a physical product over the long haul.
Hello, Jason. Tell me who you are and what you do.
Hi, Scott. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I am co-founder of Thriving Design with my sister, Morgan, and also the inventor of a little clip called a C-Bite that was patented in 2019. It's used both in gardening and in a variety of other applications, holiday and toys and household appliances and the like. So, I started off with a 3D printer back in 2013 and lifelong love of gardening and growing things. And so, it's this...
When 3D printers were $1 million, they're really expensive back then, right? You were a very early adopter. That was right when they kind of started becoming semi-commercial, right?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, Affinia, which is the one of the first desktop affordable models that was out there, used me as sort of a case study in desktop prototyping and getting to market, because I used it exhaustively for about 3 months, and created a whole variety of iterations of the product in order to get what I wanted.
So you're rapidly prototyping. You would come up with an idea, or you come up with a something, right? And you're like, okay, let's print it out and go see if it works. Was it that quick?
Yeah. And I don't even have any CAD or development skills on that side of things. I went online and used Tinkercad, which is an object-oriented program that allows you to just take shapes and modify them and add holes, and it's real spatially oriented. So I designed it that way, and then once I found something that was suitable to my application, and we can go back further to the application, as this is a gardening clip. Let me back up so that people know what we're talking about here. It's a real simple thing. I mean, nothing glorious. It's it molds very, very easily, but it has all these features to it that allow it to connect to itself in over 154 ways. So for context, Lego is 47 different connection points for two of this 4x2 bricks. So, the combinations between 6 Legos and 6 C-Bites, it's beyond astronomical numbers.
So I'm a terrible tomato grower. I grow tomatoes, just not very well. And those stupid tomato cages, they're just not valuable. Meaning that they're like, either it's too tall or too short or too big or too wide, or in the tomatoes, the tomatoes are not clingy vines. It's not going to attach to it,
You've done my job for me. I mean, tomato cages suck. Thank you for saying it for me. It's absolutely the truth. Yeah. Yep.
They're god awful. They don't work very well. They're too heavy or too light or too this or too that. And this looks like you're kind of attaching the vine where needed, as opposed to being kind of forced in this circle, right?
Well, sort of, yes. So the problem was, because tomato cages suck, I was using garden stakes to create structures. And then, the challenge of garden stakes is you got to sink them and tie the branches off as they go. And that was a solution that I knew at the time. And there weren't a lot of other options in the marketplace. But what I wanted was a pre-tie anchor, which is where this product development cycle came in from, where I could tie a string to it to lash to my heavy vine and stick it onto my garden stake. So I wasn't in there with twist ties or string tying knots. I'd save myself some time in supporting the plant and creating that space and structure inside of it where you get the airflow and the maximum light penetration. And, you get the big happy tomatoes, which is what you have a growing season. You want to do the best you can inside of that time. So trellising and plant support's one big piece of that puzzle for serious gardeners.
What's interesting is I'm looking at your landing page of the C-Bite lime green 8-9 millimeters, right? And it you get it immediately. Oh, those were the ties are immediate. I kind of think it's almost like a spoke and wheel, right? And you're able to tie offs around the spoke.
hmm
how in the
hmm
hell did you come up with this design? Because it's not obvious. Like when I first
No,
heard
sure,
about
sure.
what this was, I was like, oh, it's a clamp, that, you typically do this and that. No, 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 no. It's way more complicated than that, in that it's more valuable in that what it does. How did you come up with this?
So exactly this beginning problem with trying to fix my tomato cages, and build something that was custom to the plant. I wanted a pre-tie anchor that connected to a garden stake. And so the starting point was this C-shape clip that had anchor points and holes for the strings and ties to connect to. And ultimately, that was only so useful as, being able to use it as a tie off, to the point where I realized what I really wanted was a rigid cage that allowed me to scale my structure to the plant and to the space that I was growing in very, very customly. So that's a good word there. So at any rate, I decided to create a connection point between them, which, these dovetail joints were, a really obvious one. It's pretty, super common in woodworking. I grew up with a father who built chairs and tables and the like. So I was familiar with joinery, and just kind of popped that onto the structure right there. Yeah, perfect. And so the dovetail exists as both obvious and kind of covert. The hook there that you're looking at on the top C bite is also a dovetail, and that fits into the groove. And then the hooks themselves connect to each other. They snap into 90 degrees. The bites bite onto each other. The dovetails work at 90 degrees. You're looking at an old mold iteration right there. The new ones have 60 and 90 degree connection points on the hooks that allow for you to create even more possible connection points without having to put so much tension into the structure. And that's one of the areas that these things are great for, because it's a sort of a spring clamp. It's a glorified lock washer, but it's got tension in there, so you can open it and close it. And, as you do that, you're able to clamp it down hard onto various.
But it acts as the infrastructure for the cage, but also for the actual tie-offs, which is brilliant. Again, how did you come up with this? Like, were you just kind of iterating? You're like, okay, well, I'll draw this out and I'll print it out on my old school 2013 3D printer. You keep
Mhm.
iterating and iterating, and eventually you come up with something. Is that kind of how it went?
Kind of how it went, and I always have this notion of a thing being useful in many, many ways. If I'm going to come up with something, there should be an aesthetic to it. I mean, this is just design in general, and then it should have a function, but why not have something that can do more than itself, so I can connect stakes to themselves. And there's products in the market that connect stakes to each other, and they do so in pretty much 90 degrees. And so, the iteration went, I connected the stakes, and I connected two C bites together at 90 and 180. And then I realized that I needed X, Y, and Z on the angles to make a square angle of the cage. And, some of the features were moldability. I didn't put holes in certain places because it was the simplicity of manufacturing that I had to consider as well. So, I got to this point where I made this really cool product that connected to self and stakes, and I started selling it directly to hydro markets back in 2014, in the sort of the height of the medicinal market in Colorado, which was, there was 3 or 4 hydro stores in every town. And I got really good response from these guys because, plant supports was a big piece of the puzzle in growing cannabis at that time, and still is. So, once I realized I had a product, we took it to manufacturing, and we did some more design work on it to make it more moldable. And as I started to do that, I recognized that there were opportunities that could come into play with connectivity. Also, because I like to play with things, and as I'm playing with this product and fiddling around with it, I see how many different ways it can go together. And so then I decide, oh, well, this is something interesting. Let me push this envelope a little bit further and see how much more I can do with it. So a lot of the proportions were accidental, and then some of them were also incidental, to the original design. And now
So is this
you
the
get a
kind of thing
thing.
that started? Let's see.
Oh, I say you get a thing now at this point where, you're connecting garden stakes, and you can do just about anything you want to. Those are garden stakes right there on a connection point. And you can see how, one of a bazillion things you could possibly do with them when you want to create a custom
So
plant
what were
support.
you doing before this? Are you a trained designer, or how did you get here? Like, you saw a need, you saw a
Shit,
problem, and you simply started designing it by hand. You printed out. Like, how did you get here? What were you doing before this?
Gosh, I'm one of these, for a long time I was a bohemian, and I took, I did all sorts of different jobs. I was a school librarian for a point. I sold insurance and software for a while, one of these guys that does all sorts of different things. But from back when I was a child, I was always an entrepreneur. I would sell lollipops from Sam's Clubs in the classroom, frogs that I caught in front of King Soopers for gardeners. I had, and then, gardening was a part of this whole process. So, how did I can just remember this, all the failures along the way, the attempts, all the product development cycles that I've gone through. It's just an evolution to the point where, you do something and you realize you have a product, and now you have to go, okay, now I got to do something further with it. This is why, I invented this in 2013. The patent came out in 2014. I sold it briefly in hydro markets, but, in between some of that time, I also had an aquaponics basil farm, and we were growing basil using fish waste in a indoor facility 4 stories high with approximately 4 miles of hydroponic tubing. It was phenomenal. And I used the sea bites in that facility. And then I went on to grow medicinal hemp for a period of time indoors. And I used the sea bites in that facility. And then 2019 came along, and I'm like, patents here. I got to do something with this properly. And so this is where I invited my sister to join the company and take it out of the basement, so to speak, and into the marketplace a little bit more seriously. We realized, obviously hydro market's not but a fraction of the overall gardening market. And so the gardening market was a real focus, especially since, this thing is a perfect structure for tomato cages, for cucumber supports, for pea structures. I mean, a lot of gardeners in the world, and almost all of them grow tomatoes. So as a tomato cage, this is ideal. So we began just about the time the pandemic hit us, which was great industry-wide for the gardening industry, because everybody was stuck at home and with very little to do. Gardening boomed, sales tripled in some of these sectors. So we kind of came in a little bit late to this marketplace because we couldn't get out. We didn't have any opportunity to, demonstrate our product. We couldn't get to trade shows. So we started working online. And this is where it's like, the classic family company inventor to market sort of thing is a large learning curve that you go through as you walk down this path. So we've relied on experts in the industry and consultants and coaches to help us to, navigate the things. And, 4 years later, we have distribution nationwide. We're looking at 2 major retailers for getting on the store shelves here for 2026. We're selling on Lowe's.com, TractorSupply.com, Amazon and Walmart, of course. We have our own, web channels and are spending marketing money on Facebook and Google to draw customers and traffic that way. And so we have, also developed kits and multiple bag sizes and colors and iterations for products. So here's a little bit of the, you can see our branding there. We have a cool little crocodile on top of it, and got these kits here that we sell as well to make it easy for customers to, get what they need. But, they work with standard garden stakes. And so there's a huge market for us. And we have this challenge now of introducing it.
Yeah. I just ordered from Amazon. So I've got the bag of clips and the things coming. It's
awesome.
It is. And what's interesting is that it says on your site, you're in 280 stores. That's pretty good distribution, man. Like you've done it right now. It sounds like you're trying to get to that next step, and then the next step. That's really super exciting, and you're kind of learning along as you go. But there's a point where you're like, okay, well, I kind of understand that there's a markup. It's got to be X. I manufacture for X. I mark up to Y. It's got to be enough for wholesale distribution so they can make a profit on it too. Was your sister the expert in that, or is it just kind of intuitively going along and learning?
It's funny. I was I have the MBA and she has the engineering degree, and I'm the designer and product engineer and manufacturer. In fact, we manufacture over here in the shop with 2 injection molding machines, and she's the marketing and sales director of the company. And so she manages a lot of the relationships that we've built between distributors and the garden centers and the stores and the like. So, we both help each other out in all of the sectors, of course, because, it's what you do when you're an entrepreneur and you're starting to scale a company. You just do a little of everything.
So what is there okay, so let's just general entrepreneur stuff here, right? So is there what would you have done differently if you could kind of go back to 14? Is there some kind of how would you have done this differently?
Gosh, back to 14. That was a good time to really be involved in e-com. I think there would have been a lot more growth for me to the consumer marketplace, B2C, that way had I gotten in early, because before Amazon was so crowded and complicated, and you know, there is a lot less noise in the marketplace. There's a lot to cut through nowadays. So that being one piece of it, I probably would have expanded outside of hydro market and sought distribution. And now I understand also the value of sales reps for something like us. We really, we're selling little things. It's like popcorn. You got to sell an awful lot of it to make your money. So we have to spread ourselves out. Through the resources of others. And that helps, to get a sales representative working variety of lines, picking us up and then getting us into the doors. That would have been a big piece of it too. So this is stuff probably, even behind that, I probably would have sought more industry coaching, somebody in the industry to guide me through that process, because these are the things that we learned doing it. And there's people who have gone through this before. And so, again,
So, but specifically, what type of coaching you would have gone like, oh, okay, well, a wholesale that I should find someone who's maybe an expert in this wholesale retail thing, or getting into box stores, or what type of that were you searching out, or should have been
Sure.
searching out? I
So,
guess.
no, it's interesting. We found a guy who has been doing product repping and has helped brands. Smart Pots was one of them, was one of the first guys that got garden mulch in cubic yard bags to market on pallets to make it easier for folks. So here's this guy who's been in the industry for like 50 years, understands the distribution system, the guys to talk to inside of that, how the pricing structure needs to work, what you need to give to the distributors, early order discounts, all of these just different elements that are involved in getting your final product so you maintain a margin that's sufficient to keep you in business, and distribution is a huge part of it. But, since COVID, it's interesting things. The industry has changed, and there's a lot of disruption that's happened. Trade shows are not nearly as effective. There's been consolidation in the industry. So we're, again, just out there, doing the best that we can. And we've taken all of this information and put it to bear, try to adapt to the times with it.
Yeah, are you finding that the stores? I guess at the beginning is obvious because that was your distribution. You would probably contact a hydro store or a garden store, and maybe send them a sample product, and then they would just say yay or nay. Or how did that work? For those of us in the world looking to do kind of that type of thing, how did you get in so many stores? Because you're in a lot of stores.
Yeah. So a lot of it's knocking on doors. A lot of it is partially through the relationships that we built with, our consultants and the people in the industry, going to trade shows. Now that the COVID has loosened up in 2022, we were able to get to trade shows. And through that, having distribution, you just write orders and people buy them and you end up getting them placed. It actually fills a really big hole inside of the garden section. The difficulty is, once again, people aren't going into the store looking for sea bites. They're going into the store looking for flowers and pots and soil. And then they go, oh yeah, I need a few garden stakes. And they get over there and we have to grab their attention and say, this is a product you need, which I believe they do. It makes a garden stake useful. It overcomes the problems of tomato cages. So yeah, lots of that. It's just been just pounding at the pavement, going to shows, following up, being persistent. And, it's 2013 to now. It's been a long time of, climbing that hill. And so, you work towards the wins.
So, but I know it's when 13, you're probably like, okay, well, we'll set up a WordPress site and we'll go get like the e-commerce plugin, and then we'll hook it up to PayPal. And like in the very beginning, it's like everybody makes similar mistakes, right? You're like, well, what about the wholesale market? There's no login for that, and you got to go figure that out. And then right, and then all these really rad big commerce, all these other kind of e-commerce things came along. And I'm assuming that was kind of your natural progression kind of in that direction, where a lot of these problems are kind of solved, right? But in the very beginning, it's all WordPress. It's all really, really, really annoyingly kind of like gluing together these plugins. Like, does it work? And the taxes
Yeah,
get taken
yeah.
out, and are there taxes? And there's all these things you have to kind of figure out.
Yeah, I had a
So
BlackBerry
yeah,
though, and I was like one of these guys that, even without a lot of tech background, I was one of the, early syncer of BlackBerry emails to my computer. I was online with technical support, installing plugins, and it's just kind of fun to tinker with that. That's part of the fun of this life, is being able to have all these problems and being able to solve them, and that puts you into a state of mind, which is kind of, it's fuel to my fire.
yeah, because it's the. I mean, we had a company years ago. My wife and I started a company. We put it online. We start selling the thing, right? And then nothing happens, right, for a while, right? And then out of nowhere, while you're at dinner, you get like a real sale, and you're just,
Mm-hmm.
oh my god, I made
Ding!
$11.
Yeah,
It's really,
right. No, it's that
it's
excitement
so
level. That's
exciting.
right. That's right.
Right, and then this kind of thing that I mean, it sounds like you've had this type of success, and then like a couple of weeks later, you have another sale, and then that same day you have 2 or 3 sales, and then it starts to snowball, and you're kind of this quiet excitement, you can't sleep, and then you're making the product better, and then so I appreciate that journey because I've kind of been down the product journey, years ago before we sold that company out, and it is really, really, really exhausting. It's
Yeah,
so
it is, and
exhausting. Yeah.
it's extremely costly as well. We have this product that we manufacture it in house, and we've kept our costs to as bare minimum, and we maintained as much control over our supply chain as possible. But we still have to build it and have the inventory on hand, and assemble the kits and have the inventory on hand. You can't just do just-in-time ordering and assembling on things that you're selling tens of thousands of them ideally, or even tens of hundreds of them when you're in these operational modes without major machinery and that kind of a situation, which we're looking to scale to eventually. It's a labor of love. It's a labor of sunk
Yeah,
costs.
yeah, I'm trying to imagine this mold machine that you've purchased. Typically, this is the kind of thing you go to another company who already spent the 157,000 trillion gazillion dollars to go get
Sure.
the right, and it's
Oh
like,
my
oh,
gosh,
so are you? Is this HDPE or what is the actual plastics you're using?
So I'm using acetal. I always say it wrong. It's one of the brand names is Delrun. It's used in automobiles. It's got good hardness with flexibility. It retains its shape. About the same tensile strength as steel. It's really moldable, and it's simple in terms of like its requirements. I don't have to go and dehydrate the plastic. I don't have to worry about the ambient humidity. It works within a good range of temperatures. I can adjust the properties of it within those things. And, when it comes down to it, exactly, I bootstrap this thing, with my sister. We're doing the best we can with as little as we can. So I've found 2 injection molding machines for sale locally that were exactly the same variety as my current manufacturer was using. And I got them for a song. So, there's no denying that you got to manufacture yourself if you with a product like this to make any kind of margin. So I brought my cost of goods way down, and just they're 1990s electromechanical Arberg injection molding machines, 20 and 30 tons, and they sit in the back of my shop with cooling system, and it's pretty cool, and I
But
really enjoyed that
I know,
piece
but
of the
all those
puzzle.
kind of like, ambient humidity and like I'd have to spray it. So what is clear to me is that you've gone down this road like for a while, right? It sounds like you're like, okay, maybe I can do this myself, and then you're like, holy shit, I'm gonna become an expert in this, right? And then you're like, you have to like become like oh, as it turns out, this plastic only works at 70% humidity. Well, that's a problem, right? Or whatever, right? I'm just making stuff up, but it sounds like you've been through the ringer to get to that point. You had to learn a lot of new stuff.
Yeah, and I still have a lot of stuff to learn. The unknown is vast. And that's with every element of a business as well. The decision making process. You gotta make the decisions with all only so much information. Unless you take too long and you don't move fast enough, or you do it too fast and you don't do it with enough information. It's just
The problem with learning stuff is then you realize how little you know. The more you learn, right? Like you go down this plastic molding or this injection molding thing, and you're like, oh my God, the manuals are 3,000 pages long, and there's all this stuff. And there's not really that many YouTube videos on my version of this 1997 injection molding machine or whatever. I'm just imagining yeah,
you're absolutely right. Yeah, there's nobody around that can fix my machine for me except for the guy that initially kind of helped me along the way. It's a lot of again, this is part of this mentoring process and finding people who can help you. If it wasn't for this guy, I wouldn't be in business in the same way. He's been one of these allies along the way. There's so many people out there that are really happy to help aspiring business people succeed, which is great. And pass along some knowledge. So
that's
soak it up like a sponge if you can get it.
Yeah, you have to get your Yoda. You have to find the person that will light the hallway for you a little bit. You just can't do it on your own, or it'll take a lifetime and it'll be too late by the time you actually know it. Can you give us any advice with someone developing a product, like not your product, not a gardening product, but just any product? Is there any advice you can above and beyond the manufacturer of your own product, right? Is the best way for cost of goods, but is there any other advice you can kind of give us in terms of creating a product from scratch?
Well, this is an 11-year process. I don't know how many people want to listen to my advice. I was recently at an open call where, a fella had a product there that was concept 6 months previously, and now had contract manufacturing. There's a product development cycle that is honestly, there's a process to it, and you can reinvent the wheel and learn it yourself. But the advice would be to exactly what you say, find that Yoda, find people who've gone through this process before and learn how to fail fast so that you can succeed sooner.
I think Google used to say that, right? They would say that, we want to fail as quick as possible so we can remove that possibility and go to the next thing that may succeed. Right? It's get fail quickly and learn quickly, right? The more iterative process. Many people, but that's the thing is, it feels like you had a working. How long did it take from idea to you sold your first one? How long was that?
That was months. And in fact, it was a little deceptive into how easy it was for me to get into the first 5 or 10 stores. A lot of these guys, they knew me. I was local. They want to help a small business person out. And so they're not going to give you the feedback that you necessarily need. Oh, these are great, and this is really the challenge of a brand new thing. This is a patented object. It's got like 6 independent claims on it. There's nothing really like it. Does what it does in the marketplace. And so I have to create awareness. And, that's what my sister and I are working tirelessly to do, is to, make it so that when people see it, it not only clicks, obviously, but it, that's a good pun right there, but it goes into their cart and we can, get those sales that we need. And that's going to be the game plan, because it doesn't always happen automatically. So we've had to develop, point of purchase materials and signage and, training for the people on this floor who don't know what they're for either, and it takes a little imagination sometimes to get the real idea. I mean, you can see these shapes behind me. They're all made out of sea bites. And so, you got to sort of take it out of the bag and play with them for a little while. And once you get it, it's like, oh, okay, I can hang my Christmas lights with these. I can build trellises for anything that I want with them. It's fun. We call them tinker toys for the garden. In fact,
the early success is deceptive, right? Because you see, you go, okay, I had an idea. It took me some months to bring it to market, and then like the first 4 or 5 stores they bought, you're like, this is going to be easier than I thought, right? No, it's not. It's just, they're just local. Sure. You're face to face these people. Of course they want to buy from this local guy, right? And you realize they're to scale over Oregon or over California. Well, that's going to take a little bit longer, right? And he's got these headwinds, and there's not enough room for wholesale, or there's all the kind of problems that kind of go along with that.
Yep.
It's
and you get into distribution and you think your problems are solved, and distributors distribute. Not at all. You got to keep selling. You got to keep selling. You got to keep selling. So,
okay, Jason, thank you so much for doing this. I could talk to you for, I've already ordered your product. It's on the way. It's a little late for tomatoes, but I'll be ready for springtime for sure. It was lovely meeting you, and congratulations. I wish you nothing but success for the future.
Thanks, Scott. And if you want to see some of the things that you can do, you can check out our Instagram pages. We have seabite_. clips and cbite_guy. The clips are about the gardening stuff, and the guy is about the toys and various other uses around the house.
I'll add every one of those links to the bottom of this episode.
Sweet.